Chapter 10, The $35,000 List. Early in my sales career, I had heard a story that was to have lasting effect upon me and the way I work. The subject was time management, and the story concerned Ivy Lee, a leading efficiency expert, and Charles Schwab, president of the then small company called Bethlehem Steel. Ivy Lee called on Charles Schwab and said to him, "I can increase your efficiency and your sales if you will allow me to spend 15 minutes with each of your executives." Naturally, Schwab asked, "What will it cost me?" "Nothing," Lee said, "unless it works. In 3 months, you can send me a check for whatever you think it's worth to you. Fair enough?" Schwab agreed. So Lee spent 15 minutes with executives from the struggling young steel company and asked them to complete a single task. Every evening for the next 3 months, each executive was to make a list of the 6 most important things he had to do the next day. Finally, the executive was to rank the items in their order of importance. Each morning, begin with the first item on the list, she told them, and scratch it off when it's finished. Just work your way, write down those 6 items. If you don't get something finished, it goes on the next day's list. At the end of the 3-month trial, efficiency and sales had increased to such an extent that Schwab sent Lee a check for $35,000. Now that's still a lot of cash for such a small amount of work, but in today's money, $35,000 would probably be the equivalent of $350,000. I was very impressed with this story. I thought that if such a list was worth $35,000 to Charles Schwab, it was worth $35,000 to me. So I pondered the moral. I took an old envelope out of my purse and I wrote down the 6 most important things I had to do the next day. And I have continued making that $35,000 list every single day of my life. Everybody has been told to make a list, but this story convinced me that such a tool could actually mean money in my pocket. So this list became my mechanism for keeping me on track. It's so easy to bounce around on a busy day, looking at 1,000 important tasks and never quite knowing where to begin. The list solves that for me. The list will force you to decide which tasks are actually the most important, and for that reason, it's essential to keep the list short and sweet. Don't be overzealous and put down 17 things that must be done, because you'll look at that number and think, I can't possibly do all this. 6 is an amount easily managed, and if you reach a point where you can accomplish them all with ease, consider tackling bigger tasks. Most important, you must go through the physical motions of writing it down on paper. It's too easy to run the list through your head and ignore or postpone something you wish to avoid. When it's on the list, it's for real. Often I find I'm too busy and I don't have time to refer to my list. But by the time I glance at it again in the evening, I've usually accomplished most of the 6. I think this is because sitting and writing the task reinforces them so that I subconsciously work towards my daily goals. Another keystone to organizing my work day is organizing my desk. I hate to work at a cluttered desk, so every night I arrange my work so that completed projects are placed in one folder and work in progress goes into another folder. Materials to be reviewed go into a third folder, and so on. This way, I end each working day with a clean desk. When I arrive at the office the following morning, my secretary has organized my folders to coincide with my $35,000 list. And I start to work item by item instead of shuffling through everything and picking out the goodies, something we are all prone to do. I start with whatever's on top, no matter what. Even if it takes me 2 hours of research to answer the question in that top letter, I don't go on until I've finished it. I continue in order until I work my way down to the bottom of the pile. I handle every piece of paper only once. I think the last point is very important. Otherwise, you pick up a letter and say, gee, I don't know how to answer that. I'll have to think about it. You usually put the letter aside, pick it up a few hours later, still don't know what to do with it. It's better to gather your research, go ahead and make the decision. I see shuffling papers as a stumbling block for many ineffective managers. I believe in getting on with the work at hand. It seems to me that ineffective managers also spend more time worrying about something than it would take to actually accomplish a task. They worry their way through the entire day when they should just go ahead and do it. Often this happens because someone doesn't want to fail or look foolish. But remember, if you aren't willing to fail, you'll never succeed. I try to organize my day so that I can save as much time as possible. One way to do this is by keeping tape recorders in my dressing room, kitchen, and car. In this way, I can use otherwise idle time by listening to motivational tapes and giving dictation. Another way I try to save time during the workday is to eat lunch in my office. I'm often invited to lunch by business associates, but I rarely accept these invitations. So-called working lunches can last until 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and sitting in a restaurant that long usually means that I eat too much, and I do not feel like working when I get back to my office. The entire day has been lost. I prefer a quick, light lunch at my desk. I guess that I've always been time conscious. There are only 24 hours in a day, and all of my working life, I've tried to get the most mileage out of those hours. Many years ago, I heard someone remark that 3 early risings make an extra day. I thought about that and said to myself, if I get up at 5 o'clock for 3 mornings, I have an 8-day week. That's exactly what I've been looking for. Then I realized if I got up early 6 times a week, I'd have a 9-day week. I also discovered how much more I could get done during those early morning hours when there was no phone calls or other interruptions. When I discovered how much I enjoyed the 9-day week, I decided to form my 5 o'clock club. I invited everyone I know to get up at 5 o'clock and join the club. It's amazing how many people with Mary Kay Cosmetics have decided to do just that. Of course, some people are truly at their best during late hours, and for them functioning at 5 o'clock in the morning is impossible. But I always extend my invitation to every new Mary Kay director. So many of them have written to tell me, I've just joined your 5 o'clock club, and I love it. I get so much done before my family gets up. In my speeches to professional and community groups, I often talk about the $35,000 list and my early morning routine. If my audience is a class of prospective Mary Kay directors, I'll ask how many want to join the 5 o'clock club, and I'll always get a big show of hands. Then I'll say, okay, that's great. One of these mornings, I'm going to call you at 5:30 and ask you to read me the 6 things on your list. Now, how many still want to join my club? Surprisingly enough, they still raise their hands, and I have been known to call. When you get up at such an early hour, it sometimes is hard to get yourself started. So I always suggest that when a woman gets up, she should make herself presentable for the rest of the day. This is so important for women to do, not go to an office, but who work instead from their homes. Getting dressed and putting on makeup lifts a woman's morale and puts her in a business-like frame of mind. A woman who looks good feels good, and as a result, she will also work good. Once you've dressed, the first thing to do is to start your list of the day's 6 most important tasks. Begin with number 1, and don't procrastinate. Everyone has certain little tasks that are easier to avoid. For many Mary Kay consultants, one such task is calling her customers, an essential element in our program of ensuring customer satisfaction. 2 weeks after each sale, a consultant is supposed to call her customer and make certain she's happy with her purchase. She will ask questions such as, are you using the Mary Kay skincare? Are you getting great results? Do you have any questions? This is strictly a service call and a means of letting the customer know that we care about her. Let's face it, companies selling cosmetics over department store counters don't call their customers. This contact helps us reinforce our unique level of service. Often a customer needs to be instructed once more on the proper use of a specific product. On rare occasions, a consultant may need to pick up an item and exchange it for another formula, or even more rarely, refund the customer's money. Whatever the situation, when we know a customer's concerns, we can do something to resolve them. All of this simply means that calling her customer is very important and should be at the top of every consultant's list. But this happens to be one of the things people may avoid if they're afraid of rejection. It's easy to fear the task if you think someone will say, look, I don't have time to talk to you, or worse, I don't like those products you sold me. But such a fear is usually unfounded. Once a consultant makes 2 or 3 calls and gets positive, enthusiastic feedback from her customers, she can't wait to get back on that phone. I often tell our consultants and directors, you are the only boss you have, and I want you to be the most demanding boss that you can be. If you really want to make a success of this business, then you must put yourself on a schedule. By 8:30 every morning, you should have completed all your household duties. Then you should work from 8:30 to 5 o'clock, allowing yourself a 30-minute lunch break and a couple of 10-minute coffee breaks. Then at precisely 5 o'clock, you're off work. We have found that if a consultant will spend as much time with her Mary Kay career as she would if she were working in an office, she can easily make twice as much money as any office job could pay. And we have consultants and directors who are providing this fact every single day. Time is a salesperson's most valuable commodity. In fact, the way in which time is measured can mean the difference between success and failure. An excellent example is the one of our consultants who operates in the Southwest. She lives in a rural town with a population of 7,500 people. This small population would seem to limit her sales prospects. But our consultants actually book classes within a 150-mile radius of her home. She is able to do this because she practices excellent time management. For example, when she organizes a class 100 miles away, she books another skincare class in that vicinity for the same day. That way she doesn't waste time and money driving so far for a single appointment. Ordinary people can utilize good time management techniques and get great results. On the other hand, people who seem to have everything going for them can fail if they do not manage time. Often people in the latter group think they're working when in reality they're just worrying about those letters they should have written, worrying about those phone calls and sales they should have made. My advice has always been, if you're going to waste a day, just waste the living daylights out of it. But if you're going to work, then work. One intense hour is worth a dreamy day. Perhaps this is why I have such little patience when people are not punctual. Recently, I was asked to address a conference of businesswomen regarding ways they could be more successfully organized and manage their careers. But the organizers of this event didn't even know how to manage the program. My speech was to have run from 2 until 3 o'clock. And I had spent a great deal of effort efficiently packing as much information as I could into that time period. But by 2:15 on the afternoon of the speech, conference participants were still coming into the auditorium and milling around in the registration table. The so-called organizers didn't even know how to handle a group of a few hundred people. Finally, they decided to begin the program anyway, and at 2:25, my introduction was still in progress. When I finally began to speak, the program was already half an hour late. I have a little test I run when I'm speaking before such an audience. I look to see if anyone is interested enough to take notes on the information I'm providing. I look out into the crowd, and I couldn't see a single pencil or pen. No one was even slightly interested in learning the professional tips or management shortcuts I was prepared to discuss. The organizers had misled me into thinking this was a training session, when apparently all the audience wanted was to be entertained. So I departed from my written speech and began telling them funny stories. They felt the speech was a success because they had been entertained. At Mary Kay Cosmetics, we feel we can't afford to waste time in this manner. Every meeting has a useful purpose, and we stick to the point. Inserting a little humor, of course. We also are very strict about beginning and ending every meeting on time. Every Monday, thousands of Mary Kay unit meetings are held across the country. With the responsibility for this many sales professionals, we must set a good example, and we do. Of course, you can use many of these time-saving techniques when you organize the responsibilities you have at home. For the first 10 years of my career, I watched other women succeed when I did not, because they were free to use their time more productively. I used to say that as soon as I could afford it, I was going to hire a housekeeper. If you have been telling yourself the same thing, let me give you one piece of good advice. You can't afford not to have a housekeeper. Hiring someone to free you from time-consuming household tasks can be one of the best career decisions you'll ever make. Remember, your time is the most important thing you have. Make the most of it. Do you realize that the President of the United States has the same amount of time that you have? But look at what he gets done each day. By 10 in the morning, when most people are still in their second cup of coffee, chances are that he's telephoned several congressmen, signed 7 bills into law, and has had a press conference. He has to make these hours count. Each of us has 24 hours every day, but it's what you do with those 24 hours that makes the difference. If you are serious about your career, I feel that you should not spend your 24 hours on tasks that you could assign to someone else. I often tell our beauty consultants that one productive hour on the telephone can earn them enough money to pay for an entire day of housekeeping services. Don't worry about ironing love into your husband's collar. He probably doesn't even know about it or care. He just wants a clean shirt ready when he needs it. After people tell me they can't afford it, the second excuse I've heard is, I can't have a housekeeper. I'm too particular. That's no excuse. I'm so particular that I have to have the towels folded a certain way before they're put on the kitchen drawer. If someone folds them in another way, I want them refolded. But I taught my housekeeper how to do it for me, and you can teach someone how to do things for you. It might take a month to train someone, but it's time well spent. You must remember that your housekeeper is also a career woman, and she also wants to succeed in her job. The important point is to get someone else to do those things that do not have to be done by you personally. One of the best things I ever did was to make a list of all the tasks that had to be done in a routine day. Then I checked off the ones that nobody else could do for me. These were the things I had to do, and I concentrated on doing them. I had someone else do all the rest. You are the only person who knows how this list will be tabulated. If you think it's important for your child that you lead the Cub Scout den, then by all means do it. When you organize your time, you should first do the things that are truly important to you and your family. Then do what is important for your career. Anything after that is extra. When I finally made the first decision to hire a housekeeper, I still had some doubts. I still thought of it as something I couldn't afford. But on sheer faith, I put an ad in the weekend newspaper and waited for a response. Every time I started to think about paying a housekeeper, my heart would pound because I really couldn't even afford to pay for the ad. I needed someone who could do everything So I included all the requirements: cooking, cleaning, caring for 3 children, and so on. I ended the ad by stating the salary I could afford to pay, and then I thought, anybody who's crazy enough to answer this ad is really asking for it. But on Sunday afternoon, a woman did apply. Mabel was a very lovely person, and I was thrilled when she accepted the position. I thought, how could I be so lucky? My elation was short-lived when I remembered that she was to start work the following Monday morning. How on earth could I pay her? Talk about being motivated. I had never booked so many parties, sold so much, and recruited as many people as I did that week. After all, I had to have enough money for Mabel's salary. I made enough money to pay both of us because she relieved me of so much of my housework. Every week thereafter, my goal was to earn enough on Monday to pay her salary and on Friday to pay mine. The rest of the week, whatever I earned was mine. It worked out so well that Mabel stayed with me for 9 years. Having a housekeeper has been so great for me that I must encourage other women to do the same. If you're still scrubbing floors, you got to stop it. As one of our directors once said, I've been scrubbing the same spot in my house all my life and it's still dirty. It's going to stay dirty, so get someone else to do that. Delegate your work. Stop spending a dollar and time on penny jobs. Even if you aren't convinced that you need a housekeeper, it's still important to organize your house as you organize your career. Let me give you a tip that I think helps many women keep house a little more easily. I instruct my housekeeper to thoroughly clean one room each day instead of trying to clean the whole house at one time. I mean to go over that room from top to bottom, getting cobwebs from the ceiling, corners, dusting, vacuuming, polishing the furniture, and so on. If this is done one room at a time, the entire house will have been cleaned by the end of the week. I do the same thing when cleaning out drawers. I love well-organized drawers, so I make it a practice to quickly straighten one out every morning. Doing this on a daily basis will keep the drawers in your house fairly well organized. Organizing your grocery shopping can also save a tremendous amount of time. Most women have a tendency to shop too often. Some even stop by the store every night after work. But shopping once a week can save time and money. First, you save the gasoline used going back and forth to the market. Second, there's no way in the world you can just run into a store for a loaf of bread. I've always said that the smartest salesperson who ever lived was the fellow who invented the shopping cart. How many times have you stopped at a grocery for a single item and end up filling that empty cart? Your shopping time will be more efficient if you will always shop with a list in hand. Anytime I use the last of an item, I list it on a memo board I keep in my kitchen. Then before I go to the grocery, I transfer my list to paper and stick it to it. Clipping coupons is a way of life in this country, and I must admit I also get a kick out of having the cashier hand me back several dollars. But coupon clipping can be time-consuming. I've organized this task by keeping a small clipper and a small alphabetical file. When I find a coupon for a product I use, I file it away alphabetically for my next trip to the grocery. The whole process is streamlined, and I feel good about saving that $2 or $3. Even a woman with a housekeeper often ends up doing a great deal of cooking. Of course, you may enjoy cooking as I do, and look upon it as a form of relaxation, or as a time for the family to gather for a community project. For example, I enjoy preparing a good breakfast, and one favorite item is fresh baked biscuits. Now, I know that I could pop a commercially prepared biscuit in the microwave, but I like them made from scratch. Measuring flour and cutting in the shortening every morning is time-consuming, so I found that I could save time by storing in a large batch of dry biscuit mix on the shelf each morning I would simply take 1 heaping tablespoon from for each biscuit, add a little milk and roll it out, and pop it into my toaster oven. By the time they were ready, I had finished cooking the bacon and the eggs. The same mix doubles for pancakes. Just add a bit more milk and some sugar. The way I fix biscuits is nothing special. It merely illustrates how you can cut corners without sacrificing your family favorites. It just takes a little pre-planning. All of us must be creative about organizing our meals these days. With so many family members going in so many different directions, it's a challenge to keep nutritious, low-fat meals on the table. More and more Americans are eating in restaurants as the normal course of events. Besides saving food preparation and cleanup time, eating out can be a terrific way to settle a busy, active family around the table at once. But having said all this, I still think we should pay a little more attention to the warnings that this trend is introducing dangerously high levels of fat, salt, and sugar into our diets. One of my favorite examples of organization in the kitchen comes from a top consultant on the island of Guam. The next time you complain about preparing dinner, think of this lady. She had 10 children and a husband who liked the whole family to follow the island custom of sitting down every day to a hot noon meal. While managing this feat, our consultant was also holding 2 classes a day and becoming queen of sales for her unit. When I met her, I asked, "How in the world do you accomplish it all?" Then she told me her method. She did not hold classes on Saturday, but used that day to supervise her family as they cooked and froze enough meals for the entire week. Then each weekday morning, the children helped her set the table and get breakfast. After those dishes were cleaned, they set the table for lunch and went off to school. Before leaving for her 9 o'clock classes, the consultant put the frozen meals in the oven and set the automatic timer. By 11:30, she returned home to find the meal cooking away, and by noon, her husband and the children were seated around the table, and by 1:30, the cycle had repeated itself, and she was off for the afternoon class. 4 o'clock, she was home again to greet her children as they returned from school to enjoy a light evening supper. That's being organized. I believe every woman can take a lesson from this example and save a great deal of time around the house. The key is to have a plan and to delegate the work to other family members. I told you how my children helped me fill orders, but they also had regular household responsibilities. I really believe that children should have family duties, regardless of the family's financial circumstances. My children had to care for their own room and do various other tasks, such as gardening, raking leaves, washing dishes, and taking out the garbage. If you have children, you know that the greatest obstacle to a plan like this is the daily bickering over whose turn it is to do what or how much is enough. I solved this by developing a standardized performance appraisal system. Now, I didn't know at the time that I was using a standard employee management technique. It just seemed like common sense. Nevertheless, it worked. I assigned tasks and carefully listed what I considered to be the appropriate standard of excellence for each job. A task was assigned for an entire week, and during that week, I recorded the daily progress on a large poster hung in the kitchen. Each day, I would rank each job and give the children grades in the form of little stars. A gold star meant that you had done your job up to the standard without being reminded. A silver star meant that you had done it after being told a couple of times. And a red star meant inferior work. At the end of the week, I added up the stars and used a little formula to calculate each child's weekly allowance. Besides being efficient, I believe this system taught them the consequence and rewards associated with work and performance. I always remembered Parkinson's law when organizing work. Work expands to fill the time available for it. How true. Work expands to fill the time available for it. Remember, the Saturday morning you receive a surprise call from an out-of-town friend or relative. Hi, we're on the outskirts of town and we'll be by in about 30 minutes. Remember how you managed to get your spring house cleaning done in 30 minutes? Or remember when you had 3 hours to pack for an unexpected trip, when normally you would have spent 2 days packing? Well, that's Parkinson's Law in action. I use this principle to my advantage by giving myself time limits for every little task. When I used to do my own laundry, I'd allow myself 3 minutes to iron a shirt. If I were making beds, I'd allot 2 minutes per bed, or I'd see if I could clean the kitchen in 10 minutes. I made a game of it. Beat the clock. This was good for me because it reminded me that no matter what I was doing, my time was valuable. Time is much too precious to waste.